I didn't notice the cereal box at first. Maybe because I was rushing. Eli was late for school, I was late for work, and the entire kitchen was already a mess of spilled milk, crumpled receipts, and the smell of whatever had died in the fridge drawer. But as I reached past the box to grab my keys, something about its position flickered in the back of my mind. It wasn't where I left it. It was turned sideways, barely an inch from the edge of the counter, as if someone had picked it up and thought better of it. I chalked it up to Eli, maybe. 6-year-olds aren't known for spatial precision. But still, it lodged somewhere in me. The kind of thing that doesn't feel wrong until it happens again. The next time it was the toothbrush. Wet. I hadn't used it yet that morning. The bristles were splayed and soft with heat, like they'd just come from someone else's mouth. I rinsed it under scalding water, stared into the mirror at the pale woman with the sleep-creased face, and told myself I was imagining things. Maybe I'd forgotten. Maybe I used it without realizing. You can't trust your memory when you're this tired, not after 4 closing shifts in a row and a flu-riddled kid who screams for you every 90 minutes. That's what I told myself, until I found my journal open, 2 pages ahead of where I'd last written. Not just opened, read. I know the feel of it, the difference between a spine that's flipped by accident and one that's been thumbed through with purpose. Someone had sat on my bed, under my blanket, and read my thoughts. And I knew with the kind of quiet, shivering certainty that doesn't allow for maybe. I called the landlord, told him I had concerns, told him I thought maybe someone had been inside while I was gone. Mr. Deacon paused, then laughed, soft and apologetic, the kind of laugh people use when they're about to dismiss you but still want to seem polite. Said no one else had access. Said maintenance hadn't been in my unit. Asked if I'd maybe left the door open, or if my son had gotten into things. "Kids are explorers," he said. "He's probably just poking around. You work hard, Lena. You're stressed. People make mistakes." I didn't argue, just thanked him, hung up, and bought a tiny camera the next day. It was cheap, disguised as a wall charger, barely higher resolution than a flip phone video. I stuck it in the corner of the living room, aimed at the front door. If someone came in, I'd see them. That's all I needed. Proof, or peace. The first night, nothing. I stayed up, eyes glued to the feed on my phone, and watched myself sleep on the couch in my uniform, mouth slightly open, one shoe still on. The second night, same. Eli snoring softly in the room next door, the night rolling out uneventfully, frame by static frame. The third night, I forgot to check. I'd fallen asleep reading, too tired to remember the world existed. When I opened the footage in the morning, I didn't expect anything. At 2:17 a.m., the door opened. Not broken, not kicked, not jimmied. It opened, softly, smoothly, with the motion of someone who had every right to be there. Mr. Deacon stepped inside. He didn't say anything, didn't move fast, just walked to the recliner and sat down, hands on his knees, facing the hallway. Still, for 2 hours, he didn't check anything, didn't touch the fridge, didn't approach me or Eli, just sat there, eyes forward, like he was waiting for something, or guarding it. At 4:23 a.m., he stood up and left, locked the door behind him. Still with me? Then you already know what to do, like share and subscribe before something finds you. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even call the police. I just watched it again and again, my brain trying to fold around it like a puzzle piece that didn't fit. When I finally called, they came, 2 officers. Polite, skeptical, said they'd talk to him. Told me there was no sign of forced entry, no crime committed. Told me maybe he thought something was wrong, that he was concerned. Concerned. I sent Eli to my sister's for the weekend. I couldn't bear the thought of him breathing the same air as that man again. Then I bought a second camera. This one smaller. Better resolution. I hid it under the couch cushions, aimed low at the hallway and bedrooms. The next night I heard it. Breathing. Not mine. Not Eli's. Heavy, wet, like someone trying to hold it in but failing. I turned on every light in the apartment, checked closets, cabinets, under beds. Nothing. The apartment was empty, but the air felt like it wasn't. The next morning I checked the feed. No Deacon, but there I was, standing in the hallway, facing Eli's door, unmoving, eyes open, for over an hour. I didn't remember it. I didn't remember standing or waking or staring at my son's door like a statue. I didn't remember my face looking like that. Slack, distant, someone else's mouth stitched onto mine, and on the kitchen counter, a note, folded in half, not my handwriting. You sleep so soundly, I envy that. I stopped eating, barely drank. I only moved to reposition cameras, check footage, monitor door locks. I didn't trust sleep anymore. I started finding small things moved again. A photograph face down on the shelf. My shoes rearranged. Hair in the drain that wasn't mine or Eli's. Then the discovery. Behind the closet wall, a panel. Loose, like someone had been opening it and forgot to close it right. Inside, dusty ID cards from old tenants, a Ziploc bag with locks of hair, and 4 keys, identical to mine. I confronted Deacon, drove to his office and demanded answers. He looked old suddenly, tired, like he'd been waiting for this conversation. I knew, he said, and his voice didn't shake. Not like someone confessing, but like someone explaining something they'd already come to terms with long ago. Like he'd rehearsed it in the mirror 1,000 times. Like it was reasonable somehow. I knew someone was in there. I thought it was harmless. He doesn't hurt anyone, he just watches. He. Not maintenance, not a tenant, not even a man in any normal sense of the word. Something else. Something that doesn't blink, that doesn't speak, that lives in the walls like a parasite or a secret, feeding off silence, off stillness, off you never knowing it was there. And he'd let it happen. He'd known. Not just recently, not for weeks or months, but for years, maybe longer. And the way he looked at me, tired, hollow-eyed, almost gentle, told me he wasn't just scared of it. He'd accepted it, protected it, maybe even envied it. I didn't argue. I didn't ask questions. I didn't scream or hit or threaten to sue. I just left. Broke the lease, left the deposit, packed Eli's clothes and the toothbrush and whatever hadn't been touched, and found a studio apartment 2 towns over with locks. I watched them change twice, because even though I turned that key myself every night since, I still can't sleep without the lights on. And I never check the closet anymore, because I don't want to know if the panel's loose again. 3 weeks passed. Then Eli drew a picture. Crayons. A stick figure of me, one of him, and behind the bookshelf, in thick red lines, a man, smiling. Still with me? Then you already know what to do. Like share and subscribe before something finds you. Story 2. I wasn't running away. That's what I told myself when I signed the lease on apartment 3A, a top-floor walk-up in a building that smelled like wet cardboard and regret, the kind of place where the hallway buzzed faintly with dying fluorescent lights, and the carpet squelched in spots like it remembered every footstep that had ever crossed it. And maybe that's why I chose it, because it already carried the weight of people trying to forget something. People like me, who weren't starting over but trying to vanish in a place with bolt locks and no questions asked. Somewhere I could slide the world out of view and finally disappear. The first note came on the second day. It was early, maybe 7 a.m., and the hallway was still soaked in greasy amber light that made everything look jaundiced and older than it was. And when I opened my door barefoot, just planning to grab a newspaper I didn't order, I saw it. A folded piece of paper placed dead center on the mat, neat and deliberate like someone had balanced it with intention. And when I looked down the hallway, there was no one, nothing, just the buzz of the lights and a silence that felt too aware of itself. You're stronger than you think. No name, no signature, just clean, steady handwriting slanted slightly to the right. The kind of writing someone learned in Catholic school, the kind that made you trust it. And I looked across to 3B, the door sealed with a yellowish residue like old tape, unopened since I moved in. And I thought maybe the neighbor heard me crying through the paper-thin walls and thought this was kindness, their quiet way of saying I see you. And I held the note longer than I should have before stepping back inside and pressing it against my fridge like it meant something more than it did. By day 5, I'd found 2 more, and each one cut deeper, like the writer knew when my nights were longest, when I curled on the kitchen floor trying not to scream or call my ex or do something worse. It's okay to miss someone who hurt you. That doesn't make you weak. You always pretend it doesn't bother you. But it does. It's okay. Every time I found a new one, the air felt thicker, warmer, like the building itself had paused to listen. And one night I heard footsteps, slow and measured, not above me or beside me, but right outside my door. And when I crept to the peephole, I saw nothing. But the silence had shape, and in the morning there was another note waiting, as if it had always been there. You don't need to be afraid of the quiet. I didn't understand it, but it sat in my chest like a stone. And that's when I noticed the smell, faint but familiar. Cheap cigarettes, the kind my father used to light and forget, leaving them to burn out on their own, and I hadn't smelled that since long before I moved in. I decided to confront whoever it was. I knocked on 3B, once, twice, then harder, my knuckles stinging, my breath fogging against the cool wood, and I said I appreciated the notes but wanted to talk, really talk, and there was no answer, just a pause, not of absence but of deliberation, and I backed away with a twisting in my gut that felt too much like recognition. The landlord was changing a stairwell bulb the next morning when I asked about the guy in 3B, and he paused with the glass bulb in one hand like I'd just asked him something he didn't want to remember. And he told me the unit was empty, had been for 5 years, ever since the last tenant, a writer who'd taken his own life, whose family never came, whose belongings had been boxed up by strangers, and he looked at me hard and asked if I'd seen anyone. And I lied, said no, just thought I heard something. But even saying it made my throat dry and tight like the walls were closing in around the words. Back upstairs, I found another note. They don't understand, but I do. I'm still here. And beneath it, a cigarette butt, crushed, stained, unmistakable. The same brand my father smoked. And I hadn't mentioned that to anyone. I stopped eating, slept in 3-hour stints, camped by the door like an addict waiting for a fix. I started writing back, scribbling desperate questions on yellow paper and leaving them in the hallway like prayers. Who are you? What do you want? Why me? The replies came. Because you see things no one else does. Because you asked me to. That one made me laugh. A sharp, broken sound that echoed down the hallway until someone banged on their ceiling, and I didn't even care because something inside me was already splitting. Then the note stopped. 3 days of silence. 3 nights with no footsteps, no creaks, no smell of smoke. Just the kind of quiet that starts to feel like accusation. And on the 4th night, someone knocked. 3 soft, even taps. And when I opened the door, there was nothing but a single note tucked into the frame like a secret. I can't keep doing this if you don't remember. That was the first time I felt it. The real fear, the kind that doesn't spike but seeps, that fills your bones slowly until your own body feels unfamiliar. If you're still here, then you're one of us. Like, share and subscribe before it's too late. I tried to explain it to my sister, told her someone was watching me, sending notes, leaving smells and memories that shouldn't be there. And she told me I always unraveled like this when I was alone too long, told me to see someone, and I hung up before I could tell her she was right. That night, someone knocked again. I didn't answer, but I slid a note under the door. Please stop. Please leave me alone. In the morning, it was gone, and in its place was a single sentence written directly on the welcome mat in black ink. You asked me to come back. The next morning was still. No notes, no knocks, no smoke. Just sunlight pouring through the window and music in the background. The kind of song you don't admit you like but play when no one's around. And I opened the window wide, scrubbed the counters, changed the sheets, danced with my arms up and hair wet and forgot, for a second, that anything had ever felt wrong. I even called my sister. Left her a voicemail, light and normal, just said I was thinking of her, just said I was okay. I stayed in that moment until I saw the drawer under the sink, the one I never used, just barely cracked, like it was exhaling. And I walked to it slowly because I already knew, because some part of me always knew. And when I opened it, I found the stack. Folded notes, dozens of them, aligned like museum pieces. You're stronger than you think. The first one, I pulled another. It's okay to miss someone and still know they were wrong for you. Another. You always hide how much it hurt. They were all there. Every note I'd ever received. And on the back of each, faint and small, were my initials. The way I used to sign things in notebooks when I was 13 and lonely and pretending someone else was writing back. I grabbed one of the newer ones, the one that had been outside my door at 3 a.m., and held it up against the others. Same ink, same slant, same loops, same tremble in the curve of the eye. The tremble I now felt in my own fingers. It was mine. I dropped it, watched it flutter to the ground like something dead, and I whispered, no. This didn't mean anything. Maybe I copied them down. Maybe I was saving them. Maybe I was just trying to make sense of them. Then my knees gave out. I hit the floor with the paper crushed in my fist, backed up until my spine hit the cabinet, breath shallow and rapid like I was drowning in air. And I stared at the drawer like it might offer an answer. But it didn't. I hadn't found these notes. I had written them, all of them, folded them, placed them outside my own door like offerings to a version of me I didn't want to face, a version I had become without ever noticing. There was no man across the hall. There was never anyone in 3B. Just me and the things I didn't want to remember. You've heard my story. Now check your own hallway and tell me what you find. Like, share, and subscribe. Story 3.
It was supposed to be temporary. That's what I told myself when Jared knocked on my door just past midnight, barefoot and damp from the rain, eyes a little too dry for someone who claimed to have been crying. He said his girlfriend had thrown him out. Something about an argument over rent, and he had nowhere else to go. I barely knew him, just a neighbor I'd nodded at in the hallway, maybe made awkward small talk within the laundry room, but he was polite, quiet, said it would only be a few days. I let him crash on the couch. He brought nothing with him that first night, not even a bag or keys, just the damp hoodie he peeled off and left on the armrest before curling into the cushions like he'd done it 100 times before. I offered him a towel. He said no thanks, said he'd be out of my hair before the weekend. That was 3 weeks ago. I'm still sleeping on the couch. It started with little things. He moved the couch an inch to the left, said it was to open up the space, rearranged my fridge magnets, changed the default browser on my laptop, things that felt small but left a sour taste in my chest. When I asked if he remembered me saying he could stay a few days, he blinked like I'd confused him. You told me I could take all the time I needed. He said it so casually I began to doubt myself. The groceries started going faster. Then the laundry schedule shifted. One night I went to bed after him, woke up, and found the bedroom door locked. My bedroom. I knocked. He didn't answer. A minute later, the door creaked open and he emerged like nothing happened, yawning and scratching his neck like he belonged there. When I asked what he was doing in my room, he tilted his head. Isn't this your room? I thought I was using the guest room. I don't have a guest room. Still with me? Then you already know what to do. Like, share, and subscribe before something finds you. The name on the mailbox changed. Subtle, like a typo, but it was his name, printed neatly where mine used to be. I remembered putting a strip of blue painter's tape over it the day I moved in, 3 years ago. Handwritten with a Sharpie. That tape was gone now. The slot looked freshly labeled, like it had always been his. I checked with the property manager, Mrs. Lynn, and she sounded distracted, like she was trying to be polite while dealing with someone she didn't remember. She said Jared had been in 3B for over a year. I told her I was 3B. She apologized and hung up. I ran into Andre from 3C that evening in the hallway. He nodded and said, "Hey, Jared, everything good?" I stopped walking. "It's Chris." He blinked, confused. "Huh, you sure?" He gave a nervous chuckle and turned back into his unit later that week. Naomi from the delivery service knocked on my door. "Pad Thai, extra spicy for Jared?" she said, holding out the bag. "No, I didn't." But she was already scanning the receipt. "Says prepaid. Enjoy, Jared." She didn't even flinch. The key to my apartment stopped working the next morning. I had to knock. Jared answered with a smile. "Hey man, you forget your key again?" He tossed me a new one. Same shape, different teeth. I tried to call Maya, my ex. She and I hadn't spoken in a while, but I thought if anyone would remember me, it'd be her. She picked up and said hello, but when I told her who I was, she paused and said, "I'm sorry. Do I know you?" I checked my email. There were none. Not one. It was as if my inbox had never existed. My photos folder was empty. My clothes didn't fit right. My toothbrush was a different color. I looked in the mirror, and something in my reflection was wrong. Like my face was doing an impression of itself. I tried to pack a bag, but none of it felt like mine. The shirts were too big. The shoes had names written in them I didn't recognize. There were photos on the fridge. Jared at a cookout. Jared with a cat. Jared with someone who looked vaguely like me, only thinner, smiling, arm around Jared's shoulder. I found a note on the coffee table the next morning. In my handwriting, it said, "Don't fight it. You said he could stay." I started sleeping in my car, parked 2 streets over, engine off, jacket over the window. I told myself it was just for a night, then another. The seatbelt buckle pressed into my ribs. I woke up shivering. Once, I saw Jared walk past the windshield with a bag of groceries. My groceries. The brand I always bought. The ones I hadn't been able to find for weeks. I ducked lower, heart thudding, trying to remember what day it was. The next morning, there was a parking ticket on the dash, issued to someone else. Different name, different license plate. I tried to call Liam, a freelance client I'd worked with the past 2 years. He didn't pick up. I sent a text. "This is Chris. We worked on the graphic campaign last year." A moment later, he replied, "Sorry, don't know any Chris." When I came back to the apartment, Jared was already inside, sitting at the table. 2 plates, 2 cups. "Rough night?" he asked. "You should eat." I sat down. I don't know why. As I chewed, he smiled. "You know, you've been acting kind of strange lately. Forgetful, confused. Maybe you need a break." I nodded. He reached over and patted my hand. "Good. I'll take care of things while you rest." That night, I checked the mirror again. It smiled at me first, and then I heard Jared's voice behind me, asking what I was doing in his apartment. Still with me? Like, share, and subscribe.